and welcome to the UN World Oceans Week and the UKRI One Ocean Hub webinar entitled Identifying Intangible Cultural Ocean Heritage through Participatory Research Methods. My name is Rose Boswell. I'm the first presenter for this morning, but I'm also the chair of the session. I am an anthropologist and I'm also an NRF South African research chair in ocean cultures and heritage from Nelson Mandela Bay, specifically from the city of Gqeberha here in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa. If I may begin with my
Have we lost Rose? Yeah, okay. Sorry, if everyone can just be a little bit patient with us while we just sort this out. Thank you.
I think Rose is battling with her connection. She's probably left and will join shortly. So I think whilst we're waiting for Rose to return, I think we'll attempt to continue and just merely introduce who some of the panelists for this morning are. And I think when Rose comes back, she can take over the chair. In the meantime, my name is Ryan Pillay, and I'm from Nelson Mandela University in Gqeberha. I am a researcher and project manager in the One Ocean Hub, Ocean Cultures. Yes, Rose. You've come back to save me. Continue, Prof.
Thank you very much, Ryan. My apologies for that. I think the internet just gave in at that particular point. So, but I'm back now, tethered. Yeah. So welcome to the session, and thanks to Ryan for filling in at that particular moment. So I'm going to be presenting. I'm going to be offering a presentation. And without further ado, I'm going to just share my screen, if I may. Like that. So this presentation offers a hopefully gentle critique of participatory research methods, arguing that they may remain exclusionary to a certain extent, even though the approach has been used to advance community engagement, especially in development projects, for more than 30 years. The presentation considers participatory research to elucidate several questions that we have. But before getting into this, I'd like to share that the broader aspects of the research that I've been doing has engaged sensory identity, intangible cultural heritage, identification and management, African diaspora politics, ethnicity and race in post-colonial times. And some of the work that I've done has taken place in Mauritius, in Madagascar, the Seychelles, Zanzibar, and South Africa. There are also a number of publications that have emerged in the last few years, which basically indicate increasing interest in the role of the humanities in ocean cultures and heritage, and specifically in the identification and management of intangible cultural heritage. If you're interested in these publications, you can message me separately and I can send you the details of this further on. But the key questions that I have in mind today are: to what extent are communities participating in decision-making and implementation processes regarding the management of their intangible cultural heritage, or their ICH, as well as the management of coastal resources. The second question is, what paradigms and knowledge forms are we using when we claim to be engaged in participatory research? And what does usage of such paradigms and knowledge forms mean for the genuine participation of local communities? The third question, which ends are being promoted when we engage in participatory research endeavors? That is, who are the true beneficiaries of knowledge created via participatory methods? A fourth question, to what extent is participation a mutually empowering process? That is, what do we learn and how are we transformed by participatory engagements as researchers who are intersubjective interlocutors in the research process? To what extent are we participating in the participatory research? And a fifth question is, what do we do with forms of knowledge and paradigms of engagement that are radically opposed to our own ethical orientations or bases? How does our participatory research approaches and rationale breach the boundary of what we call radical alterity? In other words, when what we encounter in the sort of community, or as researchers tend to refer to the field research context, when we encounter radical difference to our own perspectives, how do we respond, and how is that fed into participatory research approaches? So these are some overarching points which I make in the presentation. Substantive critiques of development since the 1990s indicate that participatory research methods used in qualitative research for development purposes have largely failed, mainly because the discourse of participation deployed by organizations have focused on perception of meaningful inclusion in development processes. In other words, participation was deployed mainly for discursive purposes rather than a true effort to politically transform society. Today, communities are still compelled to use externally generated models and paradigms of data collection and to share their knowledge. While the research process remains possibly quite extractive, the reason for this is clear. As scholars, we are embedded in a powerful paradigm setting contexts, and our survival, economic and intellectual, depends on the mastery and effective usage of such knowledge forms. The discourse and practices that we are engaged with also facilitate communication and conviviality between our peers and in our knowledge communities. But these unfortunately remain largely exclusive and unconcerned about the real tragedies facing local communities. The tragedies are not merely economic, macro-political, or social, they are psychological and communal. Selection of key participants, some of whom are powerful gatekeepers, may further distort data collected, as dominant perspectives of local situations are obtained rather than a fuller representation or an overview of local experiences. So the question we have to ask is, who is participating? How are they participating? And what does their participation contribute to processes of meaningful change? In Intangible Cultural Heritage, or ICH, knowledge does not just rest with a person considered the archive or the library of knowledge in the community. Instead, knowledge is held collectively, is transmitted between and amongst people who live in a symbiotic and synchronous manner. No one is dispensable in the story-making process. Hence my point that it's very important to acknowledge that all participants within a particular locale have the capacity to generate and to share intangible
Hello, everyone. Sorry, we are struggling with internet again. Just waiting a little bit to see if Rose comes on. Ryan, should we
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yes, okay. We'll just check if Rose then comes back in the next few seconds or so. If she is battling right now, we might then move to Jess and Dr. Jessica Thornton and my presentation. But let's just give it a moment and see if Rose does in fact return.
Yeah. Perhaps we could just keep introducing ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. You with that, Nina, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Nina Rivers, and I'm sitting here with Deline today. And I'll let her introduce herself first.
Okay, I'm Deline Pandil. I'm from the Eastern Cape, Khoisan, small scale fishes. Co-op, no? And hello, everyone.
My apologies. I think I continued speaking, and yeah, I'm not sure now where I was, but I will try and recoup very quickly. I might have to switch off my video if that might actually be the challenge.
Sure, and we'll all switch off our videos as well, Rose.
Yeah, I think that might be the problem. Okay. In intangible cultural heritage, knowledge does not just rest with a person considered the archive or library of knowledge in the community. Instead, knowledge is held collectively, is transmitted between and amongst people who live in a symbiotic or synchronous manner. No one, therefore, is dispensable in the story-making process, the point that I make on the second bullet point in the slide. Similarly, in art, tangible and intangible knowledge is derived from a local or one situated context. Artists draw on what is materially meaningful to them in contexts where they are situated and engage in both introspection and intersubjective interaction to produce an aesthetically meaningful product. The challenge with the old guise of participatory research is that it came along with rapid impact assessments in the 1990s, meaning that it was inspired by an already established external paradigm, one that emphasizes the intrinsic value of data and the speed of collecting data. The focus is on swift rather than iterative deductive collection. Little space is made for time lapses between field research sessions. The latter are not perceived as necessary. Furthermore, there is continued perception of an objectively defined field out there. Scientists talk about the field all the time, distinguishing themselves from the interactive process of knowledge creation. They are knowledge holders and knowledge inquirers. In terms of ICH, or intangible cultural heritage, there's also a notion that heritage is itself objectively curated, palpable, real, and collectible. A contrasting view is that the field includes us as researchers, participating in the process of framing, evaluating, nominating, and identifying data. What we produce is not therefore always objective, although we engage in many processes that deem our own research processes to be objective. The segregation of the self from process overshadows the role of the interlocutor in shaping meaningful knowledge frames and values in the field. So not only is it important to look at the potential disruptive capacity of art, but we also need to be aware that art has the ability to engage emotion, to transgress value boundaries, to engage potentially contentious issues, to engage the senses and so on. And we can only really do this when we abandon the idea that as knowledge inquirers, we are absolutely separate from the field in which we are doing research. Therefore, the new approach or a novel participatory research involves us as interlocutors in the research process. Our subjectivities, implied or explicit, come to the fore in each research instance, and unawareness of or inattention to this fact perpetuates many hierarchies and marginalizations. The point here is not to make a political argument, but to argue that our perceptions and paradigms of research influence how we perceive participation and enact it. Who is participating and for what reasons? Further critiques of the old paradigm of participatory research method includes the fact that these also generate or validate knowledge paradigms that are external to community interests. Thus, external emphasis on knowledge generation may be of no value to communities for whom survival, for example, is a major priority. Other methods of eliciting more meaningful participation in qualitative research propose abandoning externally generated methods of data collection. And I would like to argue that artists are especially good at this, abandoning a method or tradition in order to explore a new rationale, or at least an intersubjective rationale that showcases the knowledge maker and holder together in that process. Part of the process involves letting go of established dogma. In the case of anthropology, and indirectly, I systematically had to learn to let go, for example, in doing ethnography, to let go of thick description, which is like the hallmark is a hallmark of anthropological research practice. Single site fieldwork, observation plus interviews, distinctions between field and home, between other and self. And these abandonments, very much like sort of the artistic ethos, has produced some fascinating yields. Emic-generated methods rely on time spent in local communities and deductive assessment of how knowledge is shared and the spaces in which such knowledge is expressed. And in this presentation or this webinar, you'll encounter two different examples. One that analyzes classic research methods as well as participatory research methods in the Tsitsikamma area, and then arts-based approaches in the Algo Bay. The conclusion that I wish to offer is that we need to then de-emphasize the speed and quantum in data collection, quality, quantity over quality, and we need to acknowledge the political and intersubjective nature of research, as well as the power of institutional interventions in that research process. And then, of course, we need to honestly assess the value of knowledge generated via participatory research methods. And art can offer this. Arts-based approaches to conservation are not only valuable in terms of their ability to elicit empathic emotion for the advancement of conservation, but they're also important in the provision of an alternative paradigm, to core, or as they say, in itself, for the holistic expression of what it means to be human in the Anthropocene. And I think I will stop there. And I will now hand over, if I may, to Jess and Ryan. These are colleagues who have and are doing research in Sitsikamma, a place here in the Eastern Cape. So I'm going to mute my camera, to mute my voice.
All right. Good morning, everybody, or yes, wherever you find yourself, greetings from all of us in South Africa, in Gqeberha, in particular, the Eastern Cape. My name is Ryan Pillay, and I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Jessica Thornton, and we'll be talking about a particular case study and a paper that we've written, and the paper is entitled Footprints Missing in the Sand. I'm going to switch my camera off now as well. Footprints in the Sand, the social outcome of the marine protected area to the local community in the Sitsikamma area. This is a particular part of coastline in South Africa that borders the Eastern and the Western Cape. And this is the case study that we've engaged upon to look at coastal communities. And by way of just coming into the discussion, the Sitsikamma Marine Protected Area is in fact the oldest one that we've had in this part of the world for nearly 60 years. And this particular MPA looks naturally, as all MPAs, as protecting fish stocks for further study and other type of fish livelihoods to be protected around that particular coastline. But in the discussions that we've had with the coastal community in the Sitsikamma area, there seems to be the contestation that even though MPAs, and this MPA has been updated again in 2000 and in 2016, many of the communities around the Sitsikamma area have shared with us through these particular conversations that they are largely feel excluded from it. So contributing important and urgent dialogues of cultural heritage, I'm going to talk about the method particularly here that we used in learning with and from these coastal communities. In having conversations, both one-on-ones and in group conversations, focus groups with communities, triaging observations and interviews. So we have one overarching question that gets right into the center of the discussion or the debate, as it were, and it centers around, what does the sea mean to you? What does the ocean mean for you? And most of the members that we were privileged to talk to were born in the area and could share their histories, their lived experiences of what the ocean has meant to them and how the ocean and its environment has socialized them in it. Using a snowballing sampling method, we began with particular informants in the communities. And through those conversations, and when people see us speaking to other members of the community, more people started to join. More individuals then started to direct us, no, you need to go to that man's house. No, you need to speak to this lady. Or somebody's gone to fish right now. When they come back, can we come to where you are living? And we will bring them to you. So we're very blessed in these small coastal communities along the Eastern Cape for people to come back to us and to want to have their story heard. So in listening to their story and then also capturing it on film, we were able then to look at the emotion and the inflection. We were able to keep quiet more and to listen. The highly emotive question, as I shared, what does the ocean or what does the sea mean to you, provided such a backdrop for our research, in that we were able to allow people to very honestly share what it means for them. How we got into some of the deeper modes of that question, I'll share in a bit. There's also, and I think as the previous speaker, as Rose also indicated, we also have to look at ourselves as participants in the research, and using a participatory research method, such as using film and filmmaking and sense making through conversation that's captured in this way, in a multimedia way. We also had to ask ourselves, what did it mean for us to be in the space? So in terms of a self-reflexive mode, every morning and every evening at the end of the day going into the field, we then had to put ourselves on camera and say what it is we felt, what were the biases, what were our own blind spots, what were our own emotional triggers in asking that question, but more importantly, listening to what the participant had to then share with us. The approach was multimedia, using film, photography, and storytelling. So these were some of the methods that we made use of. And as you see on the image there, we also made use of our own devices to capture our own emotion and through our own lenses. At the end of our input here, I'll share with you how different the group is and what that difference, what that diversity in particular then brought to this method of research. The methodology also constitutes a particular matrix And the matrix lens card that we have proposed here or are looking to develop further in other cases around ocean cultures that we are continuing to work on is we then looked at a card and then plotted out on the card what are some of the key areas that are from our participants that we needed to focus on. The first one would be collision of heritages. So within particular locales, within the Sitsikamma, be it Karedo, be it Plettenberg Bay, be it Storms River, be it Clarkson, we would then have to look at, okay, what are the heritages at play here? What heritages do participants bring to the discussion, but also through how is it curated in the space and how do they collide or how do they work symbiotically? Or how has heritage then been, and particularly the intangible cultural heritage through their storytelling, how does that collide? How does that then come together? And does it reach some sort of symbiosis? So that's one area in the discussion. When we naturally begin with the opening question, how do we then pick up those threads and those trends, but how do we also insert that in part of the discussion? The second part is African spirituality. In broadly speaking, what does the ocean mean to you? Have you used it for medicinal purposes? In terms of your own rituals and your own heritage, how have you been able to make use of the ocean? But not only the ocean and the sea, but also the forest. And then through that type of conversation, participants then shared with us that they very much see the ocean and the forest and the sea all as one. Then another part on the matrix card, vulnerable communities. How have vulnerable communities been impacted by the MPA? How are they making do? How are they self-organizing? And then naturally the politics of the ocean. Now with this particular matrix, it's not meant to be used in a clinical way. It's not meant to be used, we finish off the one block and we tick off and move to the other. It's meant to happen in an iterative way. It's meant for us to have a holistic conversation with participants in order for them to give us this information, but also for us then to engage in a meaningful way with them. So we can move to the next slide. Right. This is just a video. The sound is not showing.
Is it still not showing?
I can't hear the sound. What we are looking at here, colleagues, you'll be able to play the video at leisure on your own. There's something coming through now. The visuals that we attempted to show you here in a small 45-second clip is just to show you visuals of the marine protected area along the Sitsikamma through drone footage, which is also another participatory method that we then try to look at. I think that this is where my colleague Jessica Thornton takes over from. Jess, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Ryan. The history of Tsitsikamma, a place of much water, is intertwined ecologically, culturally, and politically due to the colonial dispossession and forced removals of ethnic groups settling in the area. This produces a rich history and cultural heritage, much of which still needs to be explored. The influence of First Nation people in this area, the Khoisan, plays a significant role in the names and in the practices of both tangible and intangible cultural heritage of the ocean. The voices and contemporary realities of research participants are offered as insight to their intangible heritage. They offer a composite view of how residents in the Tsitsikamma engage with the ocean, how they feel about the ocean, and what they have lost. The land and ocean are one, and people from the area are socialized as such to cultivate and organically foster good tangible and intangible practices that give rise to sustainability and resource stewardship. Intangible heritage experienced through kinship networks and family structures are filled with Friday afternoons teaching children to fish and bonding time with family. Communal practices such as sharing fish with neighbors fostered a sense of community, belonging, and sense of Ubuntu. These social practices built a community in solidarity of a formed identity that was able to feed, provide, and secure livelihoods. Established identities that were formed by Indigenous people as custodians and carers of the forest and ocean have not been passed down to the prohibited of marine protected areas that do not allow for transfer skills and knowledge through rites of passage and rituals. Coupled to this, an identity of ownership and connection to the sea, communities feel disenfranchised and locked out from a major part of their own identity, thus creating conflict internally within older generations and externally in younger generations. The interviews offer a nostalgic account wrapped in fear and survival. Young men tell their story of how they were introduced to fishing by older siblings and other community members. These sets of practices invoked a sense of belonging and community within young generations. The change for a leisured and sustainable cultural heritage has now been changed to a survival of the fittest in terms of access to the sea. A symbiotic relationship is a gift within a caring ecosystem between land, sea, animal, and man, whereby the ocean, flora, and water give strength to both the body and the community. There is a complex intertwining of forest and sea in Tsitsikamma, the mobility of people and natural resources across the Eastern Cape province, and of healing that takes place even on a transnational level. The closed access gives further issues of healing, the supernatural and the ocean, where the different ancestors reside. When one poses questions to different people, it immediately gets people talking about the heart matters, overhead matters, pertaining to the sea and the connections to the sea. It was touching to see how real people got when talking about the sea, their reliance, codependence, dependence, and how different attachments are formed to the ocean, to medicinal plants. The interviewees state that they go to the sea for food and medicine, that the sea means life. It is the air in their lungs, their medicine. Themes that came out were sustainability, the love of the ocean, lack of access. The disrupted access renders communities in limbo in both search of their identity and their past. The raw emotion, palpable feelings, and heartfelt conversations conveyed passion generations. Sorry, I'm not too sure what's happened to my slide. Let me just start that again. Sorry about that. Sorry, colleagues.
It's okay, Jess.
There you go. I think it's back over.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, it is, Jess.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Is it on a big screen? There we go.
Yes.
Sorry
yes.
about that. The raw emotion, palpable feelings, and heartfelt conversation convey passion about the ocean and access to the ocean, as well as for the children and future generations, and how this has impacted on them now. Alongside this, there are also land issues and loss of communal identity. Visiting the various areas in the Tsitsikamma area, we looked at change through time and transfer of generational knowledge. Previous generations taught their children to fish and to harvest medicinal plants that are all embedded in culture. Yet since the MPA, at least from the perception of the community, it has been made more difficult to understand the ocean and fauna. They can't make a living anymore off the ocean. And as a South African, you felt that you've heard the story of pain, division, and access that allows for people to feel different. Yet after having intimate, heartfelt conversation, it takes one to the point of where you're doing this work. In some respects, it has been painful to hear the stories and to understand the impact of policy around MPAs and permits and how this affects people holistically. It is understanding the perspective of the individual, of where they find themselves at this moment, that you are able to appreciate what they're telling you, embedded in retelling their story to magnify their voice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess. Thank you very much, Ryan. I think with all the sort of slight internet challenges this morning here in South Africa, I neglected to properly introduce both Jess and Ryan. Dr. Jessica Thornton is a researcher on our team, and Ryan Pillay is also a researcher and project manager on our research team in Tsitsikamma. And this work is actually really producing a rich and layered account of both principally intangible cultural heritage in the Tsitsikamma area, and how people are seeking to engage with some of the challenges that are being posed as a result of the creation of the MPA in that region. But they're absolutely right that when we consider intangible cultural heritage, we need to look at the collision of heritages. That is not just one set of heritages that are to be found in the area due to the history of colonial rule and apartheid. There are these multiple heritages at play. And then, of course, the relevance of African spirituality, which is very powerful in the area and influences health-seeking behavior. Layering intangible cultural heritage even further. And I think one point that the colleagues also raised, which panelists and participants may wish to follow up on, is the impact of course of the politics of the ocean and the trauma that this has created for local communities. And although we tend not to think of trauma as a form of intangible cultural heritage, in fact, it is, because it is carried with individuals and it is articulated in their daily expressions, which is something that we encountered in the field. Lastly, I think an important point that the colleagues have made, and which panelists may also wish to engage with, is the intertwining of both forest and sea. I think when we focus very much on ocean cultures and ocean heritages, and we're interested in ocean conservation, there is almost an inkling or a tendency to perceive, land and forest as being something that is completely separate from the ocean. But in the Tsitsikamma area, what the colleagues have definitely found is that, forest and sea go together. And so without further ado, I'm going to say thanks to Jessica and to Ryan for their presentation. And I'm going to hand over to Nina and to Mia, Dr. Nina Rivers, who is a postdoctoral candidate here at Nelson Mandela University, and Mia Strand, who is currently engaged in her PhD research. So thank you to Nina and Mia, and handing over to you now.
Thank you so much, Rose. I'm not sure if you can see us. Yes, there we go. There we are. Hello, everyone. So yes, today Mia and I will be presenting on what we are going to be doing in Algoa Bay. Let me just get this full screen now. There we go. And so you've seen my face a little bit, and now I'm going to go away just to save everyone's bandwidth there. Yeah, so we will be using arts-based participatory research to sort of delve in and investigate and record tangible and intangible ocean heritage. Oh, why is this not? Sorry. Okay. This does not want to go. Just a minute.
Just
sorry.
click on the arrow at the bottom, Nina.
Yeah, I
When you start your slideshow, click on the arrow.
I was. Oh, I can't. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Nelson Mandela University, and my main research question is really about finding pathways to integrate Indigenous and local coastal and marine knowledge into area-based management, particularly marine spatial planning in South Africa, because it's quite a new framework in South Africa to sort of manage and conserve our oceans. So we're really at the cusp of saying, well, while this is being developed and implemented, we really need to make sure that intangible and tangible heritages are being included. And this is really in response to the One Ocean Hub's main program aims, which is transformative governance for inclusive, innovative, and responsible blue society, and then also using sort of a systems thinking for area-based ocean management. Then, yeah, the rationale for this work is that really a lot of times Indigenous and local knowledge systems are still neglected and left out of marine spatial planning. And a lot of the times this is because, you know, these knowledge forms are quite, their oral traditions, you know, a lot of them have to do with values and what people think and feel, and it could be songs as well, and stories, and so these are often quite difficult to translate into sort of spatial forms, and one would even argue that, you know, should they be, but we do need to find a way to integrate this knowledge, because it's really important, and if we don't, yeah, people will be left out and excluded. So and also Algoa Bay, which I'll be introducing you now to, is also the first pilot site for the development towards a marine spatial plan, the first marine spatial plan in South Africa. So the broad objectives, the research objectives, is really to bring to the fore Indigenous and local community voices into marine spatial planning in South Africa, to understand how these knowledge systems are used currently, if at all, to identify primary Indigenous and local coastal knowledge systems in Algoa Bay, and then to understand how best to integrate these knowledge systems into area-based ocean management. And on the side here, you'll see here's a picture. Deline is over there. She'll be speaking to us soon. And this was sort of an inception workshop we had with the Khoisan community here in Algoa Bay, to present what we would like to do and how we would like to work with everyone. So just to orientate you a little bit, we are in South Africa over here. We're in the Eastern Cape, and we are in what was formerly Port Elizabeth, but this is now Gqeberha. And this is Algoa Bay over here. And yeah, Algoa Bay, well, yeah, Port Elizabeth or Gqeberha has about 1.2 million people at the moment. We have a deep water port, which is the Kruger port, and then we have a smaller harbour. We have 4 marine protected areas that you can see over here: Bird Island, these, and then these over here, and there's one over here and further down here. And it's really, it's you know, coastal urbanization, but then also a lot of farming around here as well. And then in terms of the coastal livelihoods in Algoa Bay, there are quite a lot, but just some of them that I've put here is yeah, bait collecting. A lot of people, we've got 2 main estuaries in Algoa Bay, the Swartkorps and the Sundays. The Swartkorps estuary, a lot of people go there. This is also the Swartkorps over here. It's a lot of people do bait collecting, and they sell the bait for fishermen. There's a lot of recreational and subsistence fishing. There's a lot of tour operators as well along the coastline. And in the estuaries, and then there's also we've got one of the largest squid fisheries in the country as well. So these are yeah, these are some chaka squid fishes over here. And then, yeah, I will let Mia take over from here and just present how we are planning to yeah, use arts-based participatory research for looking at different local and Indigenous knowledge.
Thank you, Nina. Yes, so as Prof. Rose has briefly touched upon as well, arts-based research involves adapting the tenets of the creative arts in social research projects, and can often draw on different forms of artistic mediums such as literary writing, storytelling, music, dance, performance, and visual art. The participatory part that comes in arts-based participatory research often refers to how co-researchers take part in each step of the research process and choose how, when, and what they want to share. It is about building collaborative partnerships between researchers and co-researchers to try and shift and invert the power dynamics that are inherent in research methods that also was touched upon briefly earlier. And like Prof. Rose Boswell mentioned, participatory research often conflates real participation. And the importance therefore relies on effectively communicating with co-researchers throughout the projects and make sure that you can actually question what genuine participation means and how you get there. Arts-based participatory research can provide us with different ways of seeing and perspectives. It can activate imagination, encourage empathy, and it provides tools to communicate in different shapes and forms. It can therefore often reach what is otherwise out of reach or intangible, such as cultural intangible heritage. Arts-based participatory research is appropriate when research is when the purpose is to explore, describe, evoke, or provoke. So for example, exploring how we can integrate indigenous and local knowledge systems in area-based ocean management. Nina, if you want to change the slide, thank you. So for this particular project, we will use both visual and audio art in the form of photography, or what is called Photovoice, and audio projects in order to record intangible, indigenous, and local knowledge systems. The idea is that co-researchers author their own stories using photography and audio projects, leaving it up to them what they want to share and how. So we want to use smartphones as it's more an accessible tool for future work amongst co-researchers and storytelling in own time and place. And the products evolving from these methods will be presented in a mixed media exhibition that is also co-curated by the co-researchers. Nina, if you want to go to the next slide. So, adapting the arts-based participatory research to the Algoa Bay context. Just with any research, it's very important to contextualize the work that you do, and when it comes to participatory research, it's even more important. So to have real participation, you need to know the context that you're working in and making sure that the context influences what the research is all about. So from initial secondary research and outreach to local communities in the Bay, we found issues of top-down management, exclusion from decision-making, lack of access and exclusion from places and spaces that have cultural significance is related to intangible cultural heritage and or are important fishing grounds. Arts-based participatory research to deal with complex socio-ecological systems like the one in Algoa Bay can help with that process. And like Professor Rose and Dr. Jessica mentioned, the interconnectedness between livelihoods, the ocean and coast, and intangible cultural heritage. To be able to provide as much focus and commitment as possible to each co-researchers and take precautions during COVID, of course, we've decided to work with quite a small group of 20 co-researchers that will take part in the following process. We will have photography and storytelling workshops with photojournalists and a podcaster to provide as experts in this process of giving kind of nudges to how you can use a smartphone in taking pictures and how you can audio record yourself and tell stories in different ways. We'll also do field visits to sites of what could be previously or current or future sites of cultural significance, to be able to share in situ and connect with past, present, and future possibilities and connections. We also include analysis workshops with arts-based participatory research experts, but also where the co-researchers continue to take part in shaping the project from beginning to end, and therefore also take an active part in the analysis of the results and the photos and the stories that come out of the process. Social learning becomes important, and being able to unlearn from situation scenarios where divergent ideas, norms, interests, constructions of reality, and values come together in a conducive environment. We also make sure to redefine the project objectives throughout the project, which is also important in a participatory research project. You always have to be able to come back and see what is the exact project objectives. To make sure that it's not just a discursive focus on participation, but an actual real emphasis on participation throughout. What remains to be seen, however, is whether this co-production of knowledge project and sharing of digital stories and Photovoice will be implemented in area-based ocean management in Algo Bay, and whether the call for more Indigenous and local knowledge systems to inform management is real or just discursive in its approach. Nina, if you can share the last slide. So here is the team. Is Dr. Nina Rivers, as you met already. It's me, who's the PhD candidate and working on this as my PhD project. We then have Dr. Rachel Bosch, who is an expert in art-based participatory research and curation. Michael Salzwedel, who teaches photography and social media. Dr. David Pittaway, who works with podcasting and audio projects. Professor Mandy Lombard, who's the Sarchi Chair in Marine Spatial Planning here at Nelson Mandela University. And Professor Bernadette Snow, who's the Deputy Director of One Ocean Hub and also an adjunct professor here at Nelson Mandela University. I think that was everything, unless Nina, you want to share anything else?
No, I think that is good. That is good. Thank you, Mia. Yes. And now I will hand over to Deline Spandiel, if that's okay with you, Rose.
Yes, that's perfectly fine. I was going to suggest that. And just very briefly, Deline Spandiel is part of the Khoisan Small Scale Fishers Co-op here in Algo Bay. So over to you, Deline.
Hello, everyone.
And she's asked that she would prefer to have the camera on, so you can hear us still.
Okay. So as everyone knows, the ocean plays a major role in our livelihood as a koi in the sand. The ocean was and still is our source of food security. And as everyone knows, and there's still evidence at Cape Receive, we only took out of the ocean what we need. That is the reason why our forefathers made fish traps, and that is now at Cape Receive. It's still there. And we never went hungry because there were always enough fish for us to eat.
Nina, could we just get Deline just to get a little bit closer to your computer, please, so that we can hear her?
Yes.
Cultural heritage. So we have the Khoi people, the spiritual connection with the ocean. There's one of our traditions that every 1st of January we go to the waters, to the ocean, just to clean ourselves. As our forefathers say, we had to wash away all the bad luck of the previous year and to start a new year fresh. And there's other stuff. When you feel depressed and you just go to the ocean, you just feel a calmness. You feel as you made a connection with the ocean speaks to you. And you just, when you return home, you feel your soul is like calm. And we also use ocean for various rituals, for puberties, for when a young girl get a first menstruation. Then we take her to the ocean after a while, after teaching her, take her to the ocean, into the ocean to clean her. That was part of our heritage. Now the challenges that we're facing with, the challenges started when colonization took place. We were forcefully removed from the ocean. And today, all the colonials, they claim the ocean for themselves. And today there's hundreds of boats on the ocean owned by the commercial fishers. And what saddens me the most is that owners of that big companies is not even South Africans. And they deny us as small scale fishers to enter the fishing domain. What saddens us also is in 2018, the Minister Barbara Creasy came to Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha, and gave us rights to fish. But up until today, we didn't receive any permits, so we can't go to the sea. We can't put a boat on the ocean and fish. There's too much red tape for us. Every time when we go, then they just cancel the meetings, or they just say not prepared to sit with us. So that is one of our challenges. Thank you, Nina.
Great, thank you so much, Deline. There we go. Thank you so much, Professor Boswell.
Thank you very much to Deline. That was a very, very powerful and I think very important, sort of input into the discussions that we are having here today, but more broadly in our understanding of the impact of some of the key decisions that have been made in the last, I would say, since colonial times to the present, on our local people and their access to critical resources, including the sea. I believe there are some questions that have come up from or comments that have come up from the participants, and comments that colleagues have made. I'm now going to open up maybe just to a few more questions, but I think the first one that came through, which we can potentially answer, is around the role of the South African Heritage Resources Agency and the National Heritage Resources Act here in South Africa. What are the role of these two entities, if you like, in capturing and communicating ocean heritage and culture here in South Africa? The answer is quite complex, but I will try and simplify it, and I'll encourage colleagues who would like to add a point to please do so. South Africa is signatory to Unesco's Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage. But if we have a look at that convention, for a large part, it actually protects the tangible heritage, in other words, shipwrecks and other such tangible finds that are potentially lying on the seabed. It unfortunately doesn't say much about intangible cultural heritage or people's relations to the oceans, intangible relations to the oceans. And so quite a bit of work perhaps has to be done by the National UNESCO Commission to potentially refine that together with the National Heritage Council and the Department of Arts and Culture to look at those provisions that are made by the UNESCO Convention for the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage. The other point that I think is worth making for our team is that the National Heritage Resources Act was basically promulgated in 1999. That's quite a long time back. And if we have a close look at that Heritage Resources Act, although it does mention the protection of living heritage, it doesn't say very much about ocean heritage and ocean cultures. The only legal spaces where we find a comment or efforts to basically protect ocean resources is in the Integrated Coastal Management Act, and also I think the Marine, so the Integrated Coastal Management Act, and I think there's a Marine Resources Act as well, that seeks to protect the marine resources and marine biodiversity. So long story short, as they say in South Africa, quite a lot of work still has to be done to identify the intangible cultural heritage that relates to the ocean, to understand the impact of institutional reforms and legal reforms in the country on ICH and how people are responding to those reforms, and also to better know, as Mia and Dr. Nina Rivers have pointed out, to better know the local context, to use EMIC or insider perspectives, and to fully engage with and potentially critique top-down management of intangible cultural heritage resources and the exclusion of local peoples from culturally significant places. This is something that, you know, as Deline Spandiel has pointed out, that local people are still to a large extent being excluded, or their access to the oceans is being limited by those who have historically held power. So we see quite a lot of development along the Algoa Bay coast, as well as the Southern Cape coast, including Tsitsikamma, which to a large extent still excludes the local populations. So I'm going to also maybe hand over to Senia to see if there are any questions that have come through in the list of questions, and then possibly to other colleagues if they wish to add a comment or two. Senia, questions? Any questions for us? Further questions?
It's in the chat. I put it in the chat, Rose.
Let me just scroll up here. Okay, so thanks for sharing these incredibly valuable insights and examples of local, intangible, and tangible heritage. So question for us is, how can these communities, with your support, share this with departments like the Department of Minerals and Energy, and the department, I think it's FFE, Forest and Environment, please correct me on that one, so that planning of the blue economy can take this into consideration and work with these coastal residents. So how can these communities, with your support, team members, share this information with departments in government so that planning of their blue economy strategy and initiatives can take this into consideration and work with these coastal residents? Colleagues, anyone would like to answer that question? Thank you.
Hi, Rose. Yeah, this is Nina. I mean, I think there's obviously, yeah, Jackie, you and I, and the other Coastal Justice Network, we've been talking and thinking around this. And I suppose with our work using the arts-based methodology, one of the things, because I've been speaking to a friend who is, he does a lot of work on social media, and he works a lot with actually government officials. And I asked him, I said, what is the best way to actually get this information out there? And he said that short little podcasts or audio stories that can actually go onto WhatsApp. I mean, I know this isn't sort of, like mind-blowing or anything, but just trying to get a little bit of that out there, those stories, and to make that human connection for people in government. Because, I mean, usually we try policy briefs or all those kind of things, but I mean, I've just been thinking about ways to get this research out there in a way that's actually accessible in bite-sized sort of chunks, so yeah, that's just one thing I've been thinking about.
Thanks so much for that, Nina. I see there's another question here regarding the master plan from the DFFE. So the comment is, currently the DFFE is facilitating the Ocean Economy Master Plan stakeholder process, which started on the 2nd of June and apparently plans to end in August 2021. So that's a very short lead in time. And the commentator is saying there is no space here for the voices of Indigenous and local communities other than via NEDLAC or the fisheries sector group, where these voices might be silenced by the industrial fisheries sector. So the question is, how can we challenge the dominant paradigm or framework and the methodology used in this process to ensure that the groups we are working with express their relationships and meanings in this context? So how can we challenge the dominant paradigm and methodology used in the current process of the master plan to ensure that the groups that we are working with are able to express their relationships and meanings in this context? So colleagues, would anyone like to try and answer that one or contribute? Thank you.
Hi, Rose. I'll just jump in there. Yeah, Jackie, again, a difficult question and something I know we've all been grappling with. I mean, I don't have the answers about, how to even, change this dominant paradigm system, but it seems like we've had to sort of muscle our way in as well, of getting a seat around the table and just saying, can other knowledge systems and other stakeholders please have a voice? Because often we see that, you know, they are Indigenous and local communities are left out. And Delene is sitting right here next to me and she's saying, you know, we didn't even know about this master plan. So yeah, it's about, I suppose, demanding that we get a seat to be able to make, you know, voices heard. Delene, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I don't even know how to start, because this is the first time that I see this.
Yeah.
And we as a small scale fishers, we're supposed to be in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That plan.
Yeah.
But really.
So yeah, thank you. That's all I have to say for now, and Delene as well.
Thanks, Nina. I was thinking, you know, I thought maybe just give the team the opportunity to respond. But if we look, for example, at the National Heritage Council and also the Department of Arts and Culture and Sport, the emphasis or the strategic plans of these entities within the national landscape are very much focused on the sort of celebratory aspects of heritage. What in the social sciences we would almost call the sort of the diacritical or external markers of heritage. So heritage for diversity purposes or diversity management purposes, as opposed to heritage for empowerment and transformation and so on. So I think a good place to start, it almost seems left of center, but to basically engage more energetically with the National Heritage Council and also the Department of Arts and Culture to shift their narrative of heritage, so that it moves away, you know, from the idea that, you know, heritage is only there for celebratory or representational purposes, but that heritage, and especially intangible cultural heritage, is an integral part of, you know, of human rights, the protection of human rights, the recognition of human rights, and the recognition that local communities have suffered, you know, deep trauma as a result of their intangible cultural heritage being denied to them. So this, I think, is an important and a potentially important way of engaging. So instead of going back to the Department of FFE or the Department of Minerals Energies, to have a sort of a tag team kind of approach to approach those departments, but to also work with other ministries in government to emphasize the transformational aspects of heritage. I see one comment here from a participant in Indonesia who is asking, is there anything we can do to protect the sea and the mangroves? Does any colleague have any particular answer to that? And then there's another question here from another participant. The comment is, very interesting insights and great work. I'm working on a PhD proposal around ocean values in an urban setting to understand how these urban ocean values can or should support the urban sustainable development agenda. And for this, I'm looking at a large sample size, but I'm concerned about not being able to collect this richness of inputs that you have obtained in a smaller group. Any mechanisms to assist me with this dilemma? Does arts-based participatory research approaches, or ABPR, have a threshold in terms of participants? And I see that Dr. Jessica Thornton would like to answer this question. So Jessica, over to you.
Thanks, Prof. Alzette, it's a very interesting way of looking at it. We found with our Tsitsikamma research that just doing surface arts-based participatory research wasn't enough. We had to go back, and we're now on our third trip back into the community. So it was kind of like a round robin that we had to keep doing, and each time that we went, we uncovered a new layer of intangible heritage, a new layer of lived experiences. So I think with a larger sample size, it would be difficult in getting that rich heritage that you want, where you can sit with longer periods, for longer periods of the participants and really uncover their stories. In terms of it being a smaller group, we had that opportunity that we made these close connections with the participants, and that we knew that when we went back, we could delve deeper into the conversation. So in dealing with that dilemma, you would have to go back into the field quite a few times, especially with a large sample group. And you just have to be aware, I think, of, you know, how you want to take your arts-based participatory research. It's going to be back and forth, but like I said, with the smaller sample size, even then we found that we're on our third trip, we're still uncovering, you know, these oral histories and intangible heritage. So it is a tricky one, especially with a large sample group, but I think it can be done. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to add to that experience as well, with always having to go back to the community to uncover, you know, further stories.
Yes, thanks, Jess. Prof, if I may come in here. In terms of that matrix card that we have begun to develop, I think every time you go back, the card sort of goes deeper and deeper. And it really is an iterative process. I think also it's an element of the community trusting you, and that you have formed relationships, as it were, from the first iteration, the first visit. As Jay said, we're now embarking on our third visit to the Sitsikamma area. And we then almost go deeper in. And as we go deeper in, we are able to understand some of the complexities that these communities do have. So I definitely think it's it might not be specifically about size, but it certainly would be about the depth and the quality and the ability for you to co-create this important knowledge, as opposed to being the researcher going into the field and merely just extrapolating that and never returning. So I think it's also about building the rapport and the relationship by going back from the first round of research and sharing with participants what we've done. And particularly because our method allows for some sort of viewing, because it is photography and it is film, we use those methods. We are able to show it back to communities. So that certainly helps with that iterative process. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Jess. We have this, I see there's one more question which has come up here. And the commentator is saying tangible and intangible cultural heritage may be used for tourism attractions. In the South African context, what are some of the requirements, or are there any procedures for tourism purposes? And I'm assuming that this question is around heritage tourism here in South Africa. And I thought perhaps Ryan and Jess might want to talk about just very briefly what they've found in terms of heritage and heritage tourism here in the Eastern Cape, including Algoa Bay, and potentially how some of that might feature in the ongoing research in the area.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I'll begin, and then Jess, you can jump in as well. In terms of heritage tourism, I think when research brings out a number of different voices, indigenous voices, and a lot of the intangible cultural heritage as well, we are able then to showcase what the region brings. And this is in the form of community groups, community tours that happen, and some of the tangible practices that go with ritual and ritual making and sense making. As an example, you are able to go to a particular area and a community will teach you how to cook a particular dish. That is high tourist value for not only international tourists, but for the local tourist market as well. What we've also found, not only in this project, but in another project that spanned the length and breadth of the Eastern Cape, where we looked at the intangible and tangible cultural heritage, is that how attractive it is that it opens the superficial of a location, of an area, it opens it up more, and it allows for the tourist, local or international, to see the space and to see the individuals for who it is they are, and the space for what it particularly is. Jess, I don't know if you have some examples through our previous travels as well that you want to talk to now.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. In terms of Tsitsikamma, the area is very ecotourism. There are canopy tours and there's Segway tours in the forest. And these are led by, funny enough, community members, but community members that are on the outside. So they might have been born in Tsitsikamma, but they've moved to Port Elizabeth or to Makanda, and then they've come back and they've gained knowledge elsewhere about the flora and the fauna, and then they are the ones leading these tours, where the community members themselves are actually, you know, full of this rich heritage and rich history of the land and the trees and the ocean. So you get that separation of those that are on the inside and those that are on the outside. And even the locals that live in the area, they don't have access to these tangible heritages. And how in Tsitsikamma the tourism is being sold is come to the area, you'll go through the trees, you'll learn indigenous knowledge, or come to Storms River mouth and you'll see this beautiful marine protected area. But the community members in there, they've never actually been to the marine protected area, they've never been to the big tree, they've never been in these Segway tours. And that's how tourism, I think, in this instance of Tsitsikamma, is there's a separation in the area. On the left-hand side of the town, you get the beautiful tourism and adventure, and then on the right-hand side you get the township. And there's a huge difference in where that tourism is going, where that the economy from tourism is going, and the people on the outside who are actually on the in are missing out. So I think that's just from the experience of Tsitsikamma and the tourism there. In terms of the requirements or procedures for tourism purposes, I'm not entirely sure about those requirements, but I do know that stakeholder meetings need to be held with the community members, because they are on the inside, but they are being marginalized at the same time of their knowledge being exploited in tourism. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jess and Ryan. I think what your comment also highlights, you know, for the presentation is that when we talk about knowing the context and using emic or insider perspectives, that we need to be mindful of the fact that all the areas that we are working with are mobile and continuously changing. I mean, they're not just spaces that have changed historically, but that they continue to change in the present times, that you have people from outside the local community who are not born in the local community coming to the area, and to the external viewer or to the person who's wishing to implement any kind of development in the area, you know, there's a risk that one might perceive an area to be you know, homogeneous in all senses, but we need to carry out, you know, deep you know, ethnographic work or social science qualitative research to basically find out what are the specificities of the area, who are the people that are locally from this particular space, who are the ones that have come back over a period of time. So I think it's really important, and I think that's what we have all been emphasizing, that when we talk about participatory research methods and methodologies, that we don't just take you know, externally generated paradigms or frameworks and seek to impose that on a local context, but that we get to know the local area in detail. I mean, insofar as you know, externally imposed or created tourism initiatives are concerned, that's certainly something that we're seeing in the South African context. And it's a great pity, you know, as all of you have clearly indicated, it's a great pity because, you know, as Deline herself also pointed out, there's a richness in the historical accounts and in you know, community engagements with the oceans and coasts, and that is not really being foregrounded in important strategic discussions, whether it's for the conservation of small-scale fishing livelihoods, or whether it's for tourism development. And certainly, I mean, I think, you know, as One Ocean Hub, you know, colleagues and researchers, we have our work cut out for us in that regard, in sharing this knowledge which we are gaining now from the different field sites with stakeholders beyond the local communities. In other words, with important decision makers and policy makers in national government, and of course beyond that space. I'm just wondering, I'm looking at the time, and I would like to offer colleagues any concluding statements that they wish to make. Unless there are any further questions. I don't see any further questions coming through. Are there any comments or questions that panelists themselves would like to raise as we slowly edge our way to closing the session? Thank you.
Rose, I think Pippi Sparrow wanted to share something or intervene. So I think she has the opportunity to share.
Yes, I did see that. Yes, Pippi, would you like to go ahead? Thank you.
Hi there. Yes, I think it relates to previous questions actually, but I was wondering how researchers engaged with authorities responsible for area management and spatial planning, and if they're partnering with any advocacy organisations or intend to. I suppose my question is, what are the needs for partnership that to benefit the integration of those knowledge systems you're unearthing with your research?
Thanks for that question. I don't know if Nina and Mia would like to answer that, because they have also done quite a bit of work here or they started their work here in Algoa Bay.
Yes, thank you, Rose. Yeah, Peppy, thank you for that question. And it's definitely something that we're looking into this year in terms of, you know, how do we engage with officials and implementing authorities, you know, around MSP and marine protected areas and integrated coastal zone management, and sort of what are their, you know, and I mean, I think it's also important not to create these dichotomies of like, you know, us and them, and, you know, government is the problem as well. But I think also trying to understand what their constraints are, and then how we can work with them and help support them, and see, okay, so what are the mechanisms and levers that we can try and find in order to, you know, start integrating this knowledge and start having these conversations about, yeah, you know, how can we get this knowledge integrated and put into our plans, when it seems so far at the moment where it's not really at all. So yeah, we'll be in discussions with authorities this year. And also one of the things that we're trying to do with Mia's work as well is, at the end, the culminating point is a multimedia exhibition, photo exhibition and audio exhibition, where we'll invite you know, the community of Quebec, and, you know, academics and different stakeholders, but then also definitely the coastal managers and policymakers to engage with these artworks, you know, to really see, okay, wow, this is what people are producing, this is what these knowledge holders hold, and then after that have a workshop where we bring the co-researchers together with the coastal managers, and we say, okay, let's have a really frank discussion about how we can actually you know, integrate this knowledge into plans. So I hope I've answered a little bit of how we are planning to do that, but also we're part of the Coastal Justice Network, which is very, very active in terms of scholar activism. And Jackie Sunday, you would see on the group, you know, very, very active and working with small scale fishers and reaching out to policymakers and, you know, getting voices heard. So yeah, thank you. Mia, I don't know if you wanted to say anything as well.
No, I think that's the main important points, but I think also, like Pepe, you question if we need more partnerships and build partnerships with advocacy groups. I think that's super important. And I think also for our future work, looking at how we can work together with community-based organizations and other organizations in kind of looking at how to best engage with local communities and how you can actually get the knowledge out there also from different points of view and not working just within academia. So also working with partners and other organizations is very important, I think, to just get knowledge out there in different ways and rely on different kind of channels of knowledge making and knowledge sharing.
Thanks so much to Mia and to Nina, as well as to Pepe for her question. There was a really, I think, useful additional comment here that came from Prof. Snow that indicates that in addition to what Nina has offered, that in her team, they include local governance structures as co-researchers, basically learning together. And of course, they also have what she calls a distant seat at the table. And other colleagues within the One Ocean Hub, specifically Jackie, Sunda, and Taryn Pereira, etc., are also working with local advocacy groups. I just thought, I mean, I think we probably need to conclude soon, but I thought I was really excited to hear about the forthcoming potential multimedia exhibition, which includes both visual and audio representations. And for me, I think what is so important and powerful about exhibitions like this is that it also, again, shifts the narrative on art, which has been very much perceived in the South African context, at least, to be perceived as rather, again, representational rather than fully transformative. And it would be good to see art as a powerful form of activism in its own right. And I think that is what we are hoping to also foreground in our discussion on arts-based participatory approaches. So I think, Mia, Senia, I think we've come to the end of our session. Unless there are any further comments, I don't see any further comments. And I think I would like to thank all the presenters, Dr. Nina Rivers, postdoc fellow here at Nelson Mandela University, Mia Strand, PhD candidate, also at Nelson Mandela University, Deline Spandiel from the Khoisan Small Scale Fishers Cooperative, Dr. Jessica Thornton, who's an RA and co-project manager for the Tsitsikamma team, and Dr. Ryan Pillay, who's our researcher and also project manager of our team. And also to the organizers from the One Ocean Hub and all the participants. I'd like to thank you for being here today. I can't say this morning because obviously we're in different time zones across the world. And barring the few internet hiccups that we had this morning here from the parts of the global south, I'd like to thank you and wish you well. Have a lovely day further. And Senia, I'm going to hand over to you.